Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. It's great to have you with us.
Hello. Good to be here.
Today, we're really immersing ourselves again in the law of one material. We're going to be digging into session 11, question by question.
Yeah, session 11 it's packed. Lots of interesting threads connecting here from, contact protocols right through to cosmic history and motivations.
Absolutely. It covers so much ground, the mechanics of the contact, group energy, Maldek's fate, even figures from our own history. It's quite the
That
session.
really is. And Raz's answers, as always, are just layered. Lots to unpack. So for everyone listening, this should be a fascinating look at how these concepts all tie together.
Okay, let's jump right in. The first question Don asked was about that ritual Ra suggested for making contact. He wanted to know, should that be in the book?
Right. And Ra's answer is pretty clear, actually. They basically say, well, that ritual was really just for this group to get things started.
So specific to them for the initial link up.
Exactly. Ray says it's of small importance for the book, which I think tells us something important.
Yeah, like the method isn't the main point.
Precisely. It shifts the focus away from a specific how-to and more towards the underlying connection, the intention behind it all. That's what really matters, not the exact steps.
That makes a lot of sense. It's easy to get caught up in the formula sometimes instead of the actual substance of the communication.
Totally. The seeking, the resonance, that's the foundation.
Hmm.
The ritual was just a tool for that specific moment.
Okay, moving on. Question 2 was about the group itself, the people present during the sessions. Was the number of people, like Carla, Don, Jim, important?
Ra clarifies this.
Hmm.
They say, well, the questioner, Don, and the instrument, Carla, are the most important.
The core channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the others weren't just, sitting there. They played a role. Ra says they helped Carla's comfort by sharing their physical energy complex.
Sharing energy, how does that work?
Ra describes it as a portion of your love vibration.
Hmm.
So it sounds like their presence created a kind of supportive, loving, energetic field that helped stabilize Carla.
Wow, okay. So it wasn't necessarily amplifying the message itself, but creating a better environment for the message to come through. That connection between love and energy transfer is
Mhm.
interesting.
It really is. It suggests love, expressed as shared energy, has a tangible effect in these situations. It's a nice reminder of how interconnected we are energetically.
Definitely. Okay, next is a big one. Maldek. The planet Raz said destroyed itself. Don asks, if that hadn't happened, would Maldek have gone towards fourth density self-service?
This is a fascinating look at planetary paths.
Yeah.
Ra says Maldek, well, it was a lot like Earth, actually, a mixture of energy directions.
So not just one way or the other.
No, Ra suggests the likely outcome, if it hadn't self-destructed, would have been a mixed harvest.
Mixed harvest, what does that mean exactly?
Some beings would have progressed to positive fourth density service to others. A smaller group might have gone to negative fourth density service to self. And the majority, they probably would have just repeated third density.
So multiple potential outcomes based on the collective vibration.
Exactly. It wasn't predetermined. And Ra adds that key point. Probability vortices change with action. Our choices constantly shape which future becomes real. Maldek's warfare dramatically shifted its path.
That concept is huge, isn't it? That our actions collectively literally steer the ship of planetary evolution. No fixed destiny.
Absolutely. It puts the power and the responsibility right back on choice.
Okay, switching gears a bit. Question 4 asks us about a possible unknown planet opposite our sun. Like a hidden twin or something.
Sort of. Ra confirms there is a sphere in the area opposite your sun, but they're careful with the wording.
How so? Not a planet.
Not really, in our usual sense. It's
Yeah.
described as very cold, very large, and this is the key part, locked in first density.
First density, like rocks and water.
Yeah, the most basic level of awareness. So imagine this huge cold sphere
Right.
just existing at that fundamental level.
Right.
But it's big enough that its gravity apparently affects some of our astronomical calculations.
Wow, a first density giant hanging out back there. That definitely expands the picture of our solar system.
It does. Shows there's more variety out there than just the planets we typically track.
All right, questions 5 and 6 seem related. They're about whether people from our third density can end up on negative fourth density planets, either, directly or when our cycle ends.
Yeah, Don's phrasing in question 5 was apparently a bit unclear to Ra, but question 6 gets right to it. As our cycle ends, can someone go from third density here to a negative fourth density planet?
And the answer?
Ra says the probability vortex, that likely future, indicates yes, there will be a harvest of that type. But it'll be a small one in this cycle.
Okay, so it's possible, but not the main direction things are heading for most at this transition point. It shows there are different paths based on your polarity.
Exactly. The harvest is like a sorting based on vibration. Most eligible entities are heading towards positive fourth density, but the path to negative fourth density exists too. It's just less populated for this particular shift.
Then we get a very specific question, number 7. What happened to Adolf Hitler?
Ra's response here is, well, it offers a different perspective. They state that that mind-body-spirit complex is currently in the middle astral planes.
The astral planes, like an intermediary place.
Yeah, and Ross says he's undergoing a healing process. Apparently, he was very confused even after death and needed a lot of care.
Healing, that's surprising maybe, given his actions. It suggests a kind of universal process, regardless of the life lived.
It really does seem to point that way. It underscores that idea that fundamentally all are part of the one, and healing and understanding are always possibilities, even if there are huge distortions to work through.
Okay, questions 8 and 9 follow up on this negative path. Are there any known figures from our history currently in negative fourth density or heading there? And can Ra name them?
Ra confirms, yes, a small number have been harvested to fourth density negative, and they do name 3 specific individuals:
Really? Who?
Taras Bulba, Genghis Khan, and Rasputin.
Wow. Those are significant figures, known for strong wills, power.
Exactly. Rock explains they achieved a certain penetration of the 8th level, which is intelligent infinity. This apparently made them harvestable whenever they chose during the cycle.
Penetrating intelligent infinity,
Yeah.
even on the negative path. How?
Well, that leads into the next questions, 10 and 11. How did they manage that? And did it give them, like, magic powers or paranormal abilities?
The practical how.
Ross says they had some kind of residual understanding, apparently from Atlantean times, about using their energy centers to tap into intelligent infinity.
Atlantean knowledge. Okay.
And yes, Ra confirms this did enable them to do things we'd call paranormal or magic. But there's a distinction. For Taras Bulba and Genghis Khan, it wasn't necessarily conscious, directed magic. It was more that their absolute single-minded dedication to service to self, that intense focus, opened the door. Rasputin, though, Ra says, was a conscious adept on that path.
So intense focused will, even if negative, can access that power. Consciously or not, that's quite something.
It really highlights the power of focused intention, regardless of polarity.
Question 12 then asks, okay, where are these 3 guys now?
Ra states they're in fourth density, but pinpointing an exact location is basically impossible because our space-time doesn't really map onto theirs.
Right, different dimensions, different rules.
Yeah, but Ra gives approximations. Genghis Khan is associated with the Orion Group. Taras Bulba, somewhere in Cassiopeia. Rasputin, near the Southern Cross. But these are just pointers. Ra says our vocabulary isn't precise enough.
Orion Group. That name keeps coming up in the negative context, doesn't it? Interesting.
It does. It seems to be a major hub or collective for that orientation.
So questions 13 and 14 zoom in on Genghis Khan. Who went to Orion? That was him. And what's he doing there? Like, what's his job?
Ra confirms, yes, Genghis Khan went to the Orion Group. As for his job, Ra gives a very concise answer.
Which is?
This entity serves the creator in its own way.
Serves the creator. Even him. On the negative path. That's profound.
It is, isn't it? It reinforces that core law of one principle.
Yeah.
Ultimately, all serves the one. Even if the path looks incredibly distorted from our perspective, all experiences contribute.
But Don pushes a bit in question 15. Can Ra be more specific about how he serves?
And Ra does elaborate a little. They say Genghis Khan is currently incarnate there in a physical light body.
By light body. Okay.
And his role involves disseminating material of thought control to beings Ra calls crusaders. Then Ra uses this really striking analogy.
What's the analogy?
Ra calls him a shipping clerk.
A shipping clerk for thought control material. That's a chillingly bureaucratic image for cosmic negativity.
Isn't it? It suggests a kind of organized structure, roles, hierarchies, even on the service to self path.
So question 16 naturally follows. What do these crusaders actually do?
Rest says they travel in their chariots, presumably ships or vehicles of some kind, to conquer planetary consciousnesses. Specifically, to conquer them before they achieve social memory.
For social memory. So their goal is actively stopping planets from unifying their consciousness.
That's exactly what it sounds like. A direct intervention to prevent planets from reaching that stage of collective awareness and shared understanding. It's basically trying to keep them fragmented.
Which directly opposes the positive path towards unity. Okay, so question 17 asks, well, when does a planet achieve social memory? What's the threshold?
Ress explains it happens when the entire group of beings on the planet becomes of one orientation or seeking.
Everyone aligned, basically.
Yeah, or at least seeking in the same general direction. When that happens, the fragmented group memories become accessible to the whole social complex. It leads to a unified understanding, shared goals, and much less distortion within the group consciousness.
The benefits sound huge. Clarity, unity. It really puts into perspective what we're potentially striving for here on Earth.
It really does.
Mm.
It shows the power of collective coherence and moving beyond individual distortions to a shared reality.
Okay, question 18 brings it home. Are these Orion Crusaders active here on Earth trying to implement mind control, and how would they do that?
Ra confirms their presence, yes. But crucially, they operate within the law of free will.
So they can't just force things.
You know, they make contact with individuals here who uh, energetically resonate or call to them, consciously or unconsciously. These individuals then become the conduits.
How?
They spread the service to self philosophy. They often become the elite, as Ra puts it, and try to enslave others, but through influencing their free will choices, not through direct force.
Wow. So it's subtle, working through willing participants who resonate with that energy rather than some kind of overt invasion. Free will is always the mechanism.
Always.
Hmm.
It's about finding those whose own desires or alignments match the negative frequency and then amplifying that.
So question 19 is the obvious follow-up. Can Ra name anyone specific today who is receiving this influence?
And Ra politely declines.
Hmm.
They say naming names, especially future ones, would violate free will. It's an infringement.
Okay, respects the process.
Yeah. Instead, Ra advises us to use our own discernment. Look at the fruits of the actions of people in power. See who seems primarily motivated by control and self-gain. Ra won't interfere directly in the planetary game, as they call it.
Puts the onus back on us to observe and figure things out, develop our own bullshit detectors, essentially.
Exactly. It's about cultivating discernment, not waiting for external pronouncements.
Question 20 asks how the Crusaders transmit their ideas to people here. What's the mechanism?
Ra describes two main ways, which interestingly mirror the positive path too. First, there are people who actively seek contact, maybe through certain practices, trying to open that gateway to intelligent infinity, but with a negative intention.
Right, consciously looking for that power.
And second, there are individuals whose basic vibration, their natural state, just kind of opens them up to that service to self frequency. They become receptive to manipulation almost passively, without much effort or control.
So active seeking versus passive resonance. It really shows how our own inner state attracts certain influences, positive or negative.
It really underscores the need for conscious awareness of our own energy and what we're aligning with.
And question 21 asks, what kind of information do they pass on?
Ra says the Orion group passes on information about the law of one.
The law of one, but
But with the service to self-spin, it's the same fundamental principles, just twisted towards control and self-aggrandizement. You can even include technology, like the Confederation might offer. But Orion tech is always about control and manipulation.
so it's not necessarily lies, but truth heavily distorted for a negative agenda. Same knowledge, different intention. Chilling.
Exactly. It's about twisting understanding to foster separation, not unity.
Question 22. Do scientists get technical info telepathically, leading to usable tech?
Ra confirms this happens, yes. Positively oriented scientists receive info that aids peaceful progress.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, Ra warns, negatively oriented scientists can receive similar info or twist positive info towards destructive ends.
The double-edged sword of knowledge, it really puts a huge ethical weight on scientists and inventors, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The knowledge itself might be neutral, but the intent of the user determines its impact, benefit, or harm.
So question 23 gets specific. Was nuclear energy discovered this way? Was it a mix of influences?
Ra says correct. Yes, it was missed. The people who initially gathered the scientists had mixed orientations.
Oh.
The very first scientists working on it were, Ra says, overwhelmingly positive in their intent. But later on, scientists with mixed orientations got involved, including one Ra describes as extremely negative.
Wow. So the potential for good and the potential for destruction were baked in from pretty early on due to that mix of influences. What a powerful example.
It really is a stark illustration of how these polarities play out in major world events.
And the follow-up question 24 is that extremely negative entity still incarnate on Earth?
Ra's answer is simply correct.
Goodness, that's sobering to think that level of negative influence might still be physically present.
It definitely underlines the ongoing nature of this
Mhm.
polarity dynamic on our planet. The need for conscious, positive focus remains critical.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Question 25 asks about Nikola Tesla. Where did his incredible information come from?
Ross says Kessler received his information from Confederation sources.
The positive guys.
Yes, they wanted to help his angelically positive nature, as Ra puts it, to benefit humanity.
Angelically positive. High praise.
Very. But Ra also adds a caveat. Like many wanderers, souls from higher densities here, to help Tesla's perceptions, got distorted by the illusions of our third density reality. This apparently hindered his mission somewhat.
Ah, the challenge of operating here.
Even for someone like Tesla, the density itself creates interference. Fascinating. It really shows the difficulty of bringing higher dimensional understanding fully into this dense environment without some distortion creeping in.
So, question 26 asks, what was Tesla actually trying to do? What was his main goal?
Ra says his deepest desire was to free everyone from darkness
How?
by giving the whole planet access to its own infinite energy for light and power, freely available to everybody.
Free energy for all. That's an incredibly visionary and altruistic goal. Makes the suppression of his work even more tragic.
It really does. It highlights that fundamental conflict between liberation and abundance for all versus control and scarcity maintained by existing power structures.
Questions 27 and 28 dig into this freeing from darkness. What did Ra mean exactly, and how does it relate to the law of one?
Okay, there was a bit of a tape issue on 27, but the gist Ra gave was literal. Freeing from physical darkness, providing light and energy.
Got it. And the connection to the law of one.
Ra explains in 28 that free energy would do two main things. One, nobody would need to pay for energy anymore. Two, people would have much more leisure time.
More free time.
Ah.
How does that help spiritually?
Because, Ra says, more leisure increases the probability that people will actually seek the law of one. It's hard to contemplate deeper truths when you're constantly struggling just to survive or work all the time.
So, meeting basic needs frees up capacity for spiritual seeking. It connects the material and the spiritual directly. That's brilliant.
It really is. Addressing fundamental needs creates the space for awakening.
Okay, question 29 broadens the scope. What about the Industrial Revolution overall? Was that planned somehow?
Ra confirms, yes, it was. This is the last question of the session, by the way.
Planned. By whom?
Ra says waves of wanderers incarnated specifically to bring it about. The goal was a gradual freedom from being totally bound by daylight cycles and the lack of leisure.
So the Industrial Revolution had a spiritual impetus behind it, driven by positive beings aiming to free up humanity's time and energy. That's a completely different way of looking at it.
Isn't it? It reframes major historical shifts, suggesting deeper, positive intentions might be at play, even if the results get distorted later.
Then there's just a quick check on Carla's comfort level. Standard procedure.
Right, got to make sure the instrument's okay.
And then the final question, number 31, why do the Orion Crusaders do what they do? What's their ultimate goal?
This is a key insight into the negative philosophy. Ra explains that from their distorted view, to serve the self is to serve all.
How does that logic even work?
It's based on the idea that the self is the creator, so strengthening the self strengthens the whole. But it requires constantly using and manipulating others' energy to benefit the self, with a huge focus on gaining power.
So it's a completely inverted understanding of service. The self is supreme, others are just resources for the self's power.
Exactly. It's inherently about control, exploitation, and subjugation, all driven by this distorted view of the self as the ultimate endpoint.
And that's where session 11 wraps up. Wow. Thinking back over the whole session, what are the big takeaways for you? What really stands out?
Oh, so much. The importance of intention over ritual, definitely. The role of love as actual supportive energy. That whole concept of the mixed harvest and planetary choice is huge.
Yeah, and learning about that first density sphere.
Right. And the reality of negative harvest, but also the compassion shown even for someone like Hitler. Naming those historical figures Genghis Khan, Rasputin really brings the negative path into focus.
And the mechanisms of influence free will being key. The subtle ways Orion operates, the distortion of the law of one itself.
And Tesla. the positive help he received, but also the difficulties wanderers face here. And finally, that core difference in motivation between service to self's drive for power and service to others' focus on liberation.
It really paints this picture of a dynamic cosmos, full of different intentions, all operating under this fundamental law. And like Ra keeps saying, it's up to us to figure it out, use our discernment.
Exactly. This session is like a massive invitation to observe, to think critically about the energies around us, to really ask, what's the underlying motivation here? Service to self or service to others? How does that play out?
So for everyone listening, maybe the takeaway thought is this. As you go about your week, try to look at situations, news, interactions through that lens. What's the driving force? Is it control, self-gain, or is it connection, upliftment, shared benefit? How does seeing that distinction change your understanding?
That's a great point to ponder. May your own seeking bring clarity, and may you always feel guided by love and light.
Until next time we dive deep, journey well in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Namaste. I am you and you are me.